It was a dusty summer morning. As the sun rose behind the hills, the plaza of Dusty Creek was much busier than usual. The neighing of horses, the creaking of wagons, and the murmur of the crowd filled the air. Everyone was there for one reason: the great auction. Normally, such sales offered animals, tools, or the land of debtors, but this time it was different. This time, what was for sale was a person in their most vulnerable state. Facing the crowd, standing on an old wagon, was a woman holding a baby. Her clothes were worn, her face pale, and her eyes full of fear. She clutched the child to her chest, trying to protect him from the mocking stares of the onlookers. Her name was Anna. She had been widowed very young and was buried under the debts her husband had left behind. Unable to pay them, the most ruthless creditors had brought her and her baby to auction. To them, Anna was nothing but a burden. To the crowd, the scene was both shameful and curious. Some had come out of morbid curiosity, others for entertainment. Murmurs spread through the plaza. "They say she's a widow with an orphan baby. Who would want something like that? Maybe Higgins will buy her, put her to work in his house." Among the curious onlookers appeared Elias Turner, a tall cowboy with a face tanned by the sun and a steady gaze. He walked silently through the crowd, not looking at anyone until he reached the front. The auctioneer raised his voice. "All right, who will start the bidding? A young widow and her baby, hardworking and strong. Who will begin?" Some drunken men laughed. $1, shouted one. "She'll do as a maid," said another. "She and the kid will work for me." The crowd burst into laughter. Anna closed her eyes, hugged her son, and tears began to stream down her cheeks. $2 I have. Who will give more?" Elias stepped forward. His voice was clear and firm. The plaza fell silent. Everyone looked at him. Elias kept his gaze fixed on Anna. "Any more bids?" From the back, Higgins raised his voice. "6. Elias narrowed his eyes. Calmly he replied, 10. The crowd began to murmur. $10 for a woman and a baby was unthinkable. Higgins gritted his teeth, struck the ground with his cane, but did not raise the bid. Going once at 10, going twice at 10, sold for $10 to Elias Turner. A murmur rippled through the plaza. No one understood why a solitary cowboy had done that. Elias walked toward the wagon. Anna looked up with fear and confusion. He broke the silence. "You don't belong to anyone anymore. You are free." He reached out his hand to help her down. Anna, trembling, accepted. The crowd watched them in silence. Elias climbed onto the wagon, took the reins, and drove away slowly as voices rose behind them. "This man is crazy. He took her to his ranch. What does he plan to do with her?" But Elias did not look back. He only moved forward with the feeling that something had changed in his life that day. As they left the murmur of the town behind, the wagon moved slowly along the dusty road. Elias held the reins firmly, looking ahead without speaking. The sun was already high, and the intense light colored everything in a golden hue. Neither spoke. Anna held her baby tightly, casting quick, fearful glances at the man in front of her. In her life, men had been a reason for mistrust. Being sold at an auction had only deepened her fear. After a while, Elias stopped the horses. They were in the middle of an open plain. He tied the reins to a tree and got off the wagon. Anna tensed. She thought of running, but the distance, the fatigue, and the baby in her arms made that impossible. Elias walked to the back. Anna instinctively shrank back. He was silent for a few seconds, then pulled some papers from his pocket. The purchase documents. Anna looked at them with a mix of resignation and sadness. Those papers represented her sealed fate. Elias folded the papers once, twice, and tore them in front of her. The wind scattered the pieces through the air. Anna's eyes widened. "These papers don't tie you to me or to anyone. You are free," he said with a firm voice. Anna was speechless. She hadn't expected that. Elias continued. "If you want, you can get off here. 2 days north there is a town. Maybe you can start over there. Or you can come to my ranch. You'll have a roof, no debts, no obligations. The choice is yours." For the first time in a long time, someone had given her a choice. Anna looked at her baby, who was squirming restlessly in her arms. She had no money, no family, no place to go. She slowly raised her gaze and without a word nodded. Elias untied the reins, climbed onto the wagon, and resumed the journey. The silence was no longer just fear, but also reflection. During the ride, Anna couldn't help but wonder, who is this man? Why did he do all this? What does he expect from me? Elias, for his part, kept looking ahead. Years ago, he had lost his wife and child in a harsh winter. Since then, he had lived alone, away from people, but seeing that woman and her baby at the auction had stirred something he thought was dead. Hours later, the ranch appeared in the distance. It wasn't big, but it looked well kept. A wooden house, a stable, fields stretching to the horizon. When she got off the wagon, Anna observed everything in silence. Elias pointed to the door simply. "You can stay in that room. No one will bother you. You can leave whenever you want." Anna crossed the threshold with the baby in her arms. She didn't know it yet, but she had just entered a place that would change her destiny. Elias' ranch was far from the town's bustle, in a valley where the wind blew freely across the plain. Wooden house was small but sturdy. There was a small fenced garden, a stable with a few horses, and behind it, fields stretching to the horizon. When Anna got off the wagon, she observed everything carefully. For the first time, she wasn't looking with fear, but with caution. The baby slept peacefully in her arms. While unloading some things, Elias spoke in short, clear sentences. "Behind the house there's a well. The water comes from there. Next to the stable is the vegetable patch. The second room is yours." Anna nodded silently. She still didn't know where she belonged, but Elias' voice carried no orders or threats, only simplicity. The first few days, Anna barely spoke. She kept to herself, observing everything. She took care of her son, cooked simple meals, and cleaned. Elias left early to tend to the horses and work the land. In the afternoons, he sat on the porch in silence. They didn't share long conversations, but the atmosphere wasn't hostile. They were two strangers trying to get used to living under the same roof. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Elias came from the stable with some wooden planks. He sat on the porch and began hammering in silence. Anna watched him from the doorway. Patiently, Elias pieced the planks together. When night fell, in front of him stood a small, perfectly assembled crib. Anna, standing at the entrance, looked at him in amazement. Elias looked up, pointed to the crib, and said, "For the little girl." Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. It was the first time in a long time that someone had done something for her without asking for anything in return. Meanwhile, in town, the gossip didn't stop. Turner took the widow to his ranch. He surely got her working as a maid. That man was always strange. Higgins and his men listened and smiled maliciously. For them it was all a game of power, but Elias paid no attention to the rumors. At the ranch, little by little, Anna began to adapt. Every morning she watched the sun rise from the porch with her baby in her arms. In the afternoons they shared the table in silence. That same quietness, once filled with mistrust, was now beginning to turn into something else, a shared calm. One night the wind blew outside and only the lamp lit the interior. Anna rocked her baby in the new crib while Elias looked at the starry sky from the porch. Without realizing it, he thought, "This house feels alive again." In Dusty Creek, rumors spread like the wind. Days after the auction, almost everyone in the tavern was talking about the same thing. That cowboy took the woman to his ranch. He didn't marry her. We all know what that means. This isn't right. Nothing like this has ever been seen in this town. In a corner, Higgins listened, his cane propped between his legs and a twisted smile on his face. He hadn't forgotten how Elias had snatched the woman from him at the auction. His wounded pride simmered silently. He leaned toward his men. "He took her from me in front of everyone. No one mocks Higgins and gets away with it. This isn't over." "What do you plan to do?" asked one. Higgins replied coldly, "We'll choose a night, go to the ranch, teach the cowboy a lesson, and take back what's mine." Meanwhile, at the ranch, Anna and Elias had found a quiet routine. At night, the lamp softly lit the room as Anna cared for her daughter. Elias, on the porch, watched the horizon in silence. That night, as the sky turned dark and the wind changed direction, Elias stood up abruptly. In the distance, the unmistakable sound of hooves could be heard. It was late for friendly visits. He took his rifle and positioned himself at the entrance of the porch between the light and the darkness. Three shadows approached with lit torches. The laughter and mocking voices confirmed what he feared. Higgins and his men had arrived. "Stay inside, lock the door, don't move," Elias said firmly. Anna, her heart racing, ran to the door and locked it. She hugged her baby tightly and approached the window. Through the thin curtain, she watched the scene in silence. Higgins dismounted and planted his cane in the ground. "Turner, we came for the woman. You took her at the auction without the right. Hand her over peacefully or we'll take her by force." Elias didn't move. "This is my land. The woman is free. She won't go with you." Higgins laughed contemptuously. "Free? No woman is alone here, Turner. Either she belongs to someone or she disappears." One of his men threw a torch over the fence. The flames began to spread rapidly through the dry grass. Anna gasped inside the house. Elias raised the rifle and fired into the air. The blast echoed across the night plain. The men hesitated. Higgins stepped forward, but Elias aimed directly at him. His voice was sharp and cold. "One more step, and tonight, Rich Higgins's story ends here." Silence fell abruptly. Only the wind and the crackling of the fire broke the calm. Higgins clenched his cane in fury, then mounted his horse. "This isn't over, Turner. You will have no peace." They rode off into the darkness. Elias put out the fire with buckets of water. Anna came out and helped him, trembling but determined. She was no longer the terrified woman from before. Something new had emerged in her eyes, trust. That night, when everything had calmed down, Elias sat on the porch, breathing deeply. Anna, beside the crib, hugged her baby as if swearing not to run away again. They exchanged no words, but something had changed forever. They were no longer two strangers. They were two people willing to resist together. The night of the attack left deep scars. Although the fire was extinguished and Higgins's men had left, the tension remained hanging in the air. The smell of smoke still clung to the porch wood, a silent reminder of what had happened. Elias did not sleep that night. He remained seated in the darkness, his gaze lost on the horizon. Anna, for her part, stayed by the crib with the lamp lit, as if the night's silence brought with it the echoes of her past. Days passed. After that night, Anna began to look at Elias differently. He was no longer a dangerous stranger, but an unexpected refuge. His quietness no longer caused her fear, but a sense of security. One evening, as the sun set, two chairs were lined up on the porch. Elias sat down, tired after work. Anna, after putting her daughter to bed, approached and took the other chair. It was the first time she had done so. For a long while, neither spoke. The sky turned orange and a soft breeze brushed the wood. Finally, Anna took a deep breath and broke the silence. My husband died 5 years ago. It was quick. We had many debts. When he left, everything fell on me. Relatives pulled away. Creditors knocked on the door. No one showed any mercy. They were the ones who took me to the auction. Her voice didn't tremble. She spoke with the serenity of someone who had already shed all their tears. She looked ahead without seeking pity. My baby is the only thing he left me. Everyone said he was a burden, but every night when he slept in my arms, he was the only reason I stayed alive. Tears began to roll down her cheeks, and she didn't try to hide them. Elias was silent for a long time before speaking. His gaze lost itself in the sunset. I had a family too. Anna turned her head. Elias continued, his voice low and grave. Years ago, I lost my wife and my son to an epidemic. The doctor didn't arrive in time. Since then, I've lived alone, far from everyone. I stopped talking to people. I stayed with my silence until I saw you on that wagon. His words hung in the air. There were no grand declarations or empty promises, just two people recognizing each other's scars. Anna looked down, wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Elias leaned back in his chair. For the first time, the distance between them was not fear, but understanding. That night the house was silent, but it wasn't a cold silence. It was the silence of two souls who, without saying it, were beginning to recognize each other. Weeks passed since the night attack. Higgins hadn't reappeared, but in Dusty Creek the rumors continued even stronger. In the tavern, his cane struck the floor with every poisonous word he uttered. Turner bought the widow and took her to his ranch. He didn't marry her. We all know what that means. In this town there are laws and morals. What he's doing is a disgrace. Some nodded out of habit, others murmured without conviction. Higgins, on the other hand, spoke loudly so everyone could hear. When we founded this town, we did so with clear rules, and now a cowboy thinks he can ignore them, buy a woman, and take her away as if she were his property. I won't allow it. The words began to spread. Many had known Elias for years, a quiet, hardworking, and fair man. But Higgins knew how to touch people's nerves, mixing morality with pride. One afternoon, the town plaza filled up. Higgins stood in the center, surrounded by the curious. Leaning on his cane, he spoke with his usual arrogance. Then Elias appeared on horseback from the corner. The sunlight behind him outlined his steady silhouette. The crowd fell silent. Higgins smiled contemptuously. Look who arrived, the hero. Tell us, Turner, by what right did you buy that woman and take her to your house? Do you think you're above everyone else? Elias dismounted slowly and walked to the center of the plaza. His voice was clear and deep. I didn't buy her, I saved her. A man shouted from the crowd, but you paid money. Elias turned his head in that direction. Yes, because no one else did. You all watched while she was humiliated. She and her baby were entertainment for a few. I paid to tear up that paper in front of their eyes. A murmur ran through the plaza. Higgins struck the ground with his cane. Saved her. She lives on your ranch without being married. The laws say you either marry her or set her free. There's no middle ground. Elias stepped forward, his gaze locked onto Higgins's. Your laws are what put her up for sale like livestock. No, Higgins, I didn't buy her, I freed her. And she lives on my ranch because she chose to. She's not my maid, not my property. She's free. The crowd began to divide. Some exchanged uncomfortable glances. Others nodded silently. Higgins raised his voice once more. In this town I made the rules. With your words you are challenging me. Elias did not lower his gaze. You lowered yourself when you allowed a woman to be auctioned. I don't need to challenge you, Higgins. Your actions speak for you. The murmur intensified. A few men stepped back away from Higgins. For the first time his authority cracked in front of everyone. Elias turned to the crowd and raised his voice. I know what I did, and I know that woman has hurt no one. If anyone wants to confront me for it, here I am. No one spoke. Higgins clenched his cane in frustration, aware that he had lost control. Elias returned to his horse and rode away from the plaza. The looks that followed him were no longer of doubt, but of respect. After the confrontation in the plaza, the town's attitude began to change little by little. Higgins had been exposed, and although he still spoke behind people's backs, his words no longer carried the same weight. Some men greeted Elias as he passed, and the older women began to look at Anna with curiosity, not contempt. At the ranch, life continued as usual. Elias kept working every day as always, tending the horses at dawn, plowing the land under the sun, and sitting in silence on the porch at sunset. But now, when he sat down, he was no longer alone. Anna, after putting her daughter to bed, came out almost every night to join him. One evening, as the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, Elias smoked his pipe in silence. Anna sat beside him. Her hands rested on her knees. Her face held a different kind of calm. Elias glanced at her. In her eyes there was no longer fear, only serenity. Anna looked at him too, but she didn't see the man who had bought her at the auction. She saw the man who had returned her freedom and the roof under which her daughter now slept in peace. Days later, Elias went down to the town to buy supplies. In the store, an old woman approached him. When I saw that woman at the auction, her eyes were full of terror. Now she's a different person. You've changed too, Turner. Elias didn't reply, but those words stayed with him all the way home. When he reached the ranch, he left a couple of sacks of flour and a small package of fabric by the door. Anna, seeing the fabric, ran her fingers over it as if rediscovering a forgotten memory. That same night, under the lamplight, she began to sew. Her hands, clumsy at first, regained their skill with each stitch. A few days later, she placed a new shirt on the table. For you," she said softly. Elias looked at the garment, then at her. He didn't say thank you, he simply nodded. It was a simple gesture, but in that silence everything was said. Over time, Elias began to notice the small changes in the house. New curtains on the windows, flowers in the garden, a different order, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. One night the sky was clear and full of stars. They sat together on the porch, listening to the silence of the plain. Anna, without taking her eyes off the stars, asked in a soft voice, "Did you ever think about starting over?" Elias was silent for a few seconds before answering. "I didn't start over, Anna. It was when you arrived that this house began to breathe again." Anna looked down with a shy but sincere smile. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe, not because of what anyone gave her, but because of what she had built alongside him. From then on, dinners grew longer, the silent conversations on the porch became routine, and the ranch, once just a lonely refuge, became a shared home. Summer had passed, and autumn began to paint the plain in shades of ochre and gold. The wind blew cooler, and on Elias Ranch, life had found its own rhythm. Anna's daughter had grown. She now walked through the garden with clumsy steps and clear laughter, filling the air with a joy that hadn't existed before. Elias, sitting on the porch, often watched her play. In his eyes was something that hadn't been seen for years: peace. In town, things had also changed. The gossip had faded with time. People saw in Anna a different woman with a serene face and a steady gaze. Higgins, increasingly isolated, had lost the influence he once had. One morning in the town store, a man said to Elias with a quiet smile, "From your house, no more smoke of loneliness rises. Now life rises." Elias didn't reply, but on the way back, for the first time in a long time, he caught himself smiling. That afternoon, the sky was tinged with gold when Elias went out to the porch. Anna was hanging laundry in the garden while her daughter ran between the clotheslines, laughing. Elias watched them in silence. He didn't feel the weight of the past, only the calm of the present. When Anna finished, she approached the porch and sat beside him. They didn't speak, there was no need. The silence between them was not distance, but an invisible bond. Elias fixed his gaze on the horizon and said in a low voice, "That day when I saw you on that wagon, I didn't see a stranger. I saw my own past, but today I no longer look back. Today I see what we have." Anna didn't answer. Her eyes were bright, but her face radiated a peace she hadn't known for years. Night fell slowly. Inside the house, the girl slept deeply. Outside, the wind gently tapped the door, and the warm light of the lamp escaped through the windows. Elias leaned back in his chair. Anna was beside him. They didn't need words. Two people who had arrived broken had met in the silence, and in that silence they had built a home. The story did not end with a grand, heroic gesture or cheers in the plaza. It ended as true things begin, quietly, with respect, and with a calm fire lit in the middle of the plain.